Thank you, everybody, for joining another episode of Intentwise Connect webinars. We're here with Spencer Padway, CEO of Search Nurture and Project FBA, who's going to walk us through today's presentation, which is all about how to market across multiple retail media networks. So if you're like most brands that are selling on, maybe you started on Amazon or Walmart or some other retail media networks, you know there's dozens or hundreds more. And every day that goes by, more and more brands are starting to realize the opportunity that exists with these other retail media networks, maybe that aren't as large as Amazon or Walmart. So we're happy to have Spencer here, who's going to walk us through the strategy that you should put into place and how to actually manage the process of advertising and running a business across these retail media networks. So before we jump into the full balance of today's presentation, I did want to just give a quick overview of who Intentwise is and what we do. So Intentwise is a software provider in the Amazon space. We work with hundreds of the biggest brands and agencies in Amazon and Walmart, including Search Nurture. And we provide applications to help you with advertising management across multiple retail media networks, syncing your data and owning your data across multiple retail media networks, and also getting into the weeds with data clean rooms like Amazon Marketing Cloud. And Intentwise is happy to host these educational sessions with people across the industry to help you learn and to help you become better brands and better sellers and better agencies in today's market. So thanks for joining us for today's presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Spencer to walk us through today's agenda, and then we'll do a quick poll to see where we're at and jump into the presentation. Spencer, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you for that intro. I'm happy for the opportunity to help teach and educate as well with Intentwise. So I'm Spencer Padway, CEO of Search Nurture. Search Nurture is a holistic e-commerce agency, so that's where we're drawing a lot of my experience here from. Also the owner of Project FBA, which is a website designed for smaller sellers to help them understand, what tools to use and how to kind of DIY your way into a smaller Amazon presence. And so today what we're going to be talking about is, first, why it's important to advertise on retailers now. And as Ryan mentioned, we're not just going to be talking about Amazon and Walmart, but the long tail retailers, at least long tail in terms of e-commerce. Then we're going to talk about setting goals with multiple retailers. There's a lot of complexity in the market because there's so many different options. There's so many different features. Everything is changing very quickly. So how do you make sure you're setting the right goals? How do you structure your team for success? And finally, advanced data and insights. So how can you make better business decisions when you have all of these different factors? So we're going to get started there. But I think before we dive into that, we're just going to do a quick audience poll here and ask you a couple questions about, do you sell on multiple marketplaces today? And have you connected your data across those multiple marketplaces?
Yes. And if you don't mind just taking a quick second to answer this question, we'll tailor our presentation today to be more in line with who's joined us. And obviously, to make the most out of Spencer's time with us today, please feel free to also utilize the webinar chat and Q&A as we go through the presentation if you have questions for Spencer or for me. All right, we've got a few responses here. It looks like 100% of the audience does sell in more than one marketplace today, which is great. And we're split in terms of whether or not the data is connected. So looks like maybe 2/3 of them say yes, either with a partner or through a partner, or they do it in-house. And about 1/3 still is dealing with siloed data by marketplaces.
All right, wonderful. Well, that's good. The title worked. We got the right audience. People with multiple marketplaces are in here. And for the rest of you with your connected or disconnected data, that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we get deeper insights? How do we make the right decisions with these deeper insights? And how do we really make sure that all of this, retail presence works for you? So we're going to dive right into that. But before we dive right in, I just want to take us all on a quick journey, because I think setting the foundation and making sure that we understand kind of where we all started and what we probably remember is important. So quick traveling back in time. This was 2015 when Amazon released what is still pretty much their current design of their website. And as we all remember, Amazon didn't have sponsored product ads at this point. So it really wasn't that long ago that all of these retailers were focusing on co-op dollars or on products sold to make their money. And of course, then Amazon added sponsored products and quite a few other ad types. And, I remember this moment, I was thinking, like, Amazon's a retailer, they sell products. They can't sell advertising to sell the products that we're already paying fees to sell, right? But they could.
And they
And so
did.
soon Amazon, has this large new super high margin line item in their books. They've expanded to a ton of ad types, different product pages with paid listings above the fold, non-endemic advertising or their DSP, their offsite advertising. And very quickly, all of the other retailers caught on. They noticed, okay, we have this resource, we have this asset, we have this publisher site, and we can make a bunch of money by making all of these sponsored products. So it's really kind of a pay to play now. So Walmart has their own DSP, sponsored product ads, Lowe's, Instacart, Home Depot, Wayfair, and all of these. So this kind of brings us up to where we are today, which is how do you manage all of these retailers and do you need to advertise on them? Or if you do, which one should you focus on? It's pretty rare that people have unlimited budgets. And so when you're looking at this huge swath of places that you can advertise, you really need to figure things out. Are you going to go just for top of funnel and aim at Google and Amazon? It's still the lion's share, those really big players. Do you want to find those niche, smaller digital retailers that have big offline presences? How are you going to structure your teams and budgets to align with these goals? And how do you know which advertisements are going to work where? So that's what we're going to dive into. But even with all of these retailers, you might be thinking, okay, but how do I drive even more traffic to these? And we have more complexity. So even beyond that, how do you know your awareness advertising is working, your video advertising, or where do you send your Google ads? Even with social, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they've all added a new wrinkle in that they're becoming mini retailers in a sense. They have social stores now. So what are you going to do with these channels when you're working with all of these retailers? Do you want to send social to D2C? Do you want to send it to your biggest offline partner, your biggest online partner? So there's so much complexity. There's all these different points of purchase, all of these decisions. And it's really easy to play in this space, but it's hard to truly win. It's hard to find that really high efficiency that's based on these deeper data and deeper insights. And so as the industry has gained more and more complexity with every retailer adding their own version, all these different channels, connected TV, these decisions have become more and more difficult to make and to truly understand and to win, to be the most efficient, to get the best return. So before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit about the Amazon flywheel. And if you're on multiple retailers, you're probably familiar with the Amazon flywheel. When Amazon introduced their sponsored product ads, right, they said, okay, here's part of the thing about advertising. If you get your Amazon flywheel going, you're going to sell more. So if you get more sales and more reviews, we're going to give you stronger rankings on our site because you're selling and we want to provide the products that are selling the most. If you get stronger organic rankings, you get more traffic, more reviews, more sales, more rankings. That's the flywheel. It accelerates itself. And once it's going, it doesn't really stop as long as you keep pushing that. So enter Amazon's advertisements. Now you have this new way to kickstart your flywheel. You put in retailer advertisements. And if you fast forward from where we started to today, you might notice that on mobile, you have to scroll down to get anything unsponsored. And same often on desktop. You might get one organic listing above the fold these days. So now retailer advertisements are really necessary. The industry has evolved a lot. And it's mostly because of this kind of flywheel effect. And most of the other retailers are also kind of following this flywheel as a concept. And when you get to physical retailers, the flywheel concept gets much more complex. And there's one thing I've always liked about this flywheel, the Amazon flywheel, which is that it helps connect the difference of why you don't want to just look at ROAS or ACOS all the time. Because if you're just looking at that, you're not including the value of those ads on your organic rankings. We actually ran a case study a few years back. It was actually kind of an accidental case study, but one of our clients' payments declined on Amazon. And for 2 weeks, all of their ads dead stopped. And we were actually able to see that when the ad revenue declined, there was about a week delay where then the organic rankings declined. And it was almost in lockstep when their ads went back up, the organic rankings went right back up. And it was a really interesting study because we were able to see, okay, these organic rankings are truly propped up by how much advertising you're doing. And so if you're just looking at ROAS, you're missing a huge amount of value. And there's been evolutions here. A lot of people look at tacos now. Tacos is total ACOS, or what is your cost versus your entire revenue, so organic and paid together. But even tacos looks at that somewhat indirectly, right? You're not looking at that direct correlation of organic rankings or the difference in actual sales. You're just kind of saying, okay, we're looking at this as a bigger picture. So what's really important to look at now is the incrementality of all of your advertising. So not just how many more units the ad is selling, but how many organic sales directly are being driven by the increase of that. Or even going further, seeing your awareness or your impressions or the other value that you're gaining. An example of that might be your sponsored brand video ads, which even if people don't click, you're getting a nice 6-second bumper ad to tons of people that are scrolling through the page. So there's a lot of value in these kind of things. But when you're talking about what we're calling click and mortar retailers, right? What other indirect market effects are there? It gets a lot more complex very quickly. So you still have more traffic, more reviews, more sales, but more sales doesn't just drive stronger organic rankings. You're also driving potentially in-store placement. If you have a new product and you're having good sales, they're going to be more willing to add that new product. If you do have that new product, you can use this flywheel to get that going to help get it better shelf space or move quickly enough. If you can get those bigger POs, you can get better leverage in terms for negotiations. So there's a ton of value when you're looking at online ads, especially in physical retailers, that is not related to ROAS or ACOS almost at all. And as we're going to talk about in this presentation, one of the most important things is that a lot of people look at digital ads just for digital, but they're not just for digital. And this is really fascinating. This is a 2024 study, so it's very recent, last month actually, which is to say 32% of shoppers say that they shop solely in store without really using any kind of digital aid. 28.8% shop only online or primarily online. But that leaves 38.6% of shoppers that still like to shop physically and use their phones or their digital devices to complete that sale. So 67.5% of shoppers are using some kind of digital device or assistance to work on that sale, and 25% are specifically using that assistance while they're still shopping. The pickup shoppers are using their digital assistants, but they've already done that before they get to the store. So there are 25% of people that are maybe in the store researching your product, seeing what's in stock, walking around the store and trying to understand, their product on their phones while they're in that store. So if you're talking about the flywheel, right? We're just talking about that flywheel. If someone is in store and searching on their phone for product and they see somebody else's product, they're going to buy that. And it's going to help the other product's flywheel and slow yours down. And this is something that won't be reflected in a return on ad spend calculation. This is where it gets trickier. And this is where you need advanced tracking, more insights, and more awareness to really make sure that you have the right data to make the right business decision when you're talking about advertising budgets and how you're going to focus on these retailers.
I was just going to add, I think that statistic is super interesting because it's often discussed as like e-commerce shoppers and in-store shoppers, where we've always left out that third, an equally sized group that is a little bit of both in the middle, which is very interesting. And how do you optimize towards those customers that are sort of in online shopping in store? What should your strategy be there? I think that's very interesting that we often forget about that third segment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a focus, and we'll talk about this shortly, of the value and the amount of digital e-commerce revenue, right? But the amount of in-store revenue, retailer revenue, is still extraordinarily large. And so talking about a third of people that are driving in-store revenue through digital, it's a huge market that's gone largely unconnected. And I think people are becoming more aware of this. I know, Intentwise put out kind of the prospect show synopsis, which was like the full customer journey. And yeah, part of that customer journey is that people are still buying physically in store. And that's really important to target these folks. Yeah, kind of doubling down on this, 71% of consumers like to frequent these physical stores. So that's a huge portion. And only 33% of those use no digital aids. So 67% of the in-store consumers are still going out there. And that's a huge percentage of this. And to kind of follow up what we were just saying, right? When it comes to these ads, a lot of people focus digital only. But you forget that the in-store revenue numbers for these retailers is absolutely huge. Walmart, Costco, Kroger, Home Depot, and Target. These are large numbers of billions and billions of dollars of your target market. And what's even more interesting about this to me, when you're looking at this as a brand, is that if you look at something like, let's take Home Depot, for example. Home Depot's got $146 billion in revenue. But look at its user base. It's not selling A to Z. It's not a Walmart or a Target or an Amazon where it has a ton of different products. It's selling to a very specific home improvement audience. And so that audience can provide a ton of value. And it's likely a larger audience than the other retailers as a home improvement audience. So when you look at these things and look, okay, where can I win? Where can I expand? What am I missing? There's a lot of value in winning on these retailers. And we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. But they're also far less competitive right now. People haven't quite gotten on the uptake of doing the long tail retailers because they feel like, yeah, it's a smaller, or the digital market's not much, or my ROAS might have been lower. I know that's something that we get a lot, where people say, well, we tried this channel and the ROAS was a lot lower, but you're not including the entire flywheel of what else is it driving? What's the in-store purchase? And a lot of these platforms are a little bit more simple, right? And I think people kind of take that for granted, where they say, okay, it's simple, that means it's easy. But I would actually argue the opposite. It takes a lot more manual work and knowledge. It reminds me of the early days, 2017, when we started advertising on Amazon. And the only way you did that was you'd log in and you click on every cell. I remember when the bulk upload Excel sheet came out and we celebrated. We're like, oh my God, we can finally automate some things. It was still pretty hard to use, but it was a nice relief. Obviously, we're far beyond that now with tools like Intentwise and APIs and good interfaces. But having to go in there and do it manually requires a lot of work, but also a lot of knowledge and expertise to be able to do that all as a person. So the next question, how do we take advantage of this? How do we win with these? And unfortunately, as always, it's not one size fits all. And there's a lot of questions that you as a brand need to answer. And we're going to talk about how to answer those and what those questions are. Of course, as a business, you probably already have a vision, and you probably already have business goals. And so when you're looking at these marketing goals, they need to really closely relate to your business goals, but they need to be tested. I know people don't often like testing goals. Strategy and objectives, of course, you're going to test those to achieve the goals, but even the goals themselves need to be tested, because a lot of them are going to be hypotheses, because there's not a ton of absolute data when it comes to these online and offline retailers. So there's a ton of considerations that we just talked about, right? Is your flywheel going to drive in-store placement or better shelf position, bigger POs or leverage for terms, continued presence in the retailer? It's important to remember that even if a customer buys in person, if they review your product, they're still doing that online. There's no such thing as an in-person review, right? No one's standing as the town crier yelling about your product. So that's going to drive more of those. And then what are the influences on your overall goals? Right now, are you saying, okay, we just need maximum efficiency, we need sales right now? And so you want to use these retailers to drive discoverability and drive immediate sales? Or are you more interested in building that customer relationship and that long-term LTV, lifetime value? And you want to make sure that they actually purchase on your own site or your social stores, where you can add them to your email lists or your retargeting lists. And so you have a ton of different factors, you have a ton of different options. And the big questions here are, what's going to be best for the business, either long-term or short-term? And what are all of the different variables? If you have a new product that you want to push in a retailer, you probably want more of that discoverability. If you're talking about an older product, you may want to build that relationship on your own D2C site or on your Facebook or Instagram store. This requires a ton of testing. You have to set up a Facebook shop and test the conversion rate versus the conversion rate of sending someone to your D2C, versus being able to retarget from your D2C, versus what's the acquisition cost. And we'll talk more about that shortly. But what this really means is that we're entering kind of a new era of retail advertising. And so, your strategy needs to be holistic. And this is one of the biggest changes with this many options, this many interactions and data. Focusing on individual channels or metrics just won't work anymore. And we'll talk about that as well. But it's a big problem that I see, especially in larger brands and manufacturers and holding companies, is that everything's very divided. But these goals really need to work together and be tested. So let's talk a little bit about different considerations and things to look at. So we talked about Home Depot and Lowe's. They have a super targeted audience, right? And if you want to build product loyalty, they have extraordinarily loyal customers. 75% of Home Depot and 83% of Lowe's are loyal customers and repeat purchases there. So it's something to consider when you're advertising, which is, even if they see your product and they may not buy it today, you're building awareness with that core targeted audience, no matter who's looking at it, because the only people going into these stores, or most of the people, are your exact target demographic. So you're not wasting any of these ad dollars with these people seeing your product. The audience that's going to something like Amazon is going to be super broad. You kind of go there to buy anything. So you might run across anyone doing different research, items like that. So when you're looking at these, are these where your actual target audience is? Is this where you want to find discovery or find those net new customers? And again, the trade-off is you might miss out on your D2C or social store benefits, like capturing that user information, not being able to do future outreach or retargeting. So these are these business decisions. This is what we need to look at of finding, what are you doing and are you driving that? But one of the big things that I've seen with brands that we've worked with is finding where your fanatic shops and reaching them can really build that long-term relationship. Really trying to connect with the people that love your product is going to be crucial. And there's always somebody out there. There's always a subset of people that will end up being that fanatic. So doing whatever you can to connect with them in the best way to connect with them is going to be really important.
So I think it's
Yeah.
interesting how you look at these, what you call long tail marketplaces or retail media networks, as similar to long tail keywords, right? If you have a more specific search or a more specific audience, in the case of Home Depot and Lowe's, of course, much more specific than Amazon or Walmart, you have less of a risk of wasting your ad spend or wasting your dollars there. It just reminds me of an example on Amazon years ago. Like we had a client that was selling uh, Wi-Fi connected security cameras, like for the house, like a baby monitor. And they could not bid on the keyword Wi-Fi camera because some big advertisers had taken that first word Wi-Fi and they were selling routers. And so they bid up so high that there was just one huge amounts of waste going to that person who was bidding very high on a broad keyword on a channel like Amazon. And there was no opportunity for us to compete in that market. So I think it's very interesting that you should be thinking of these additional marketplaces, at least in the case of Home Depot and Lowe's and Best Buy and others, as those more specific funnels. So if you sell a product that fits perfectly with the demographic and the other products sold in these stores, it could be a huge opportunity to limit waste and potentially get out of those situations where you would be competing with a non-competing product on Amazon or on Walmart.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I like, you mentioned long tail retailers. Obviously, and when I'm talking about these being long tail in the digital space, in the physical space, I wouldn't call these long tail. They're huge, but
Right.
that's the opportunity, right? That's exactly the opportunity. And what you're just talking about with those Wi-Fi cameras is, if you look at ad spend, 81% of retail search spend is going to Amazon right now. And for me, that just signals a huge opportunity because we've seen clients win on these channels over and over. And right now, they're not saturated. You're not going to have that person coming into the budget that's just buying everything, throwing tons of dollars at these things because they're just that focus isn't there yet. And so, the question I like to ask here is if you go back and be an original advertiser on Amazon, would you? Right? Would you just hold that flywheel for a super long time and reap those benefits? I know I certainly would. And
Yeah.
I remember having clients, yeah, 6, 7 years ago where we won Amazon's advertising space. We had the sponsored products, the sponsored brands, and every organic spot, and it was great. So when people typed in our keywords, that was a great level of branding where it was just us, and us.
Yeah.
And so, beyond just the purchase rates and the ROAS, that was super good for the brand of getting that keyword association where people are like, okay, I want this product, and it was just our product, top to bottom. And so,
And your daily budget's $25 and it like never runs out because your ACoS is 3%. Those are the good days.
yeah, exactly. And the dollars go really far. And I
Yeah.
think exactly that's one of the things that shies people away is that you look at the ACoS of the ROAS and say, oh, but it's too low because you're not considering all of the other net effects. You're not considering the people that are looking at your products and buying them in store because it's much harder to connect. So yeah, these are not saturated yet, and I think that's a big part of the play. It's really what's important when you're looking at these is yeah, the lion's share is where you can maybe get the most revenue because there's the most there, but you're ignoring these huge pieces. And I think that leads to how you want to approach these ads and talking about strategies as well. Most of these networks have a ton of different ad types available. And for this example, I use the Amazon ad types. I use those because every single network has different names for these. And I'm assuming that this audience will understand what these are, even though they're placed differently or, somewhat different on each retailer. And a lot of these things do operate differently as well. Like Home Depot, for instance, you can do category targeting as opposed to keyword targeting. So they all run differently. But the idea is if you're looking at this and you're understanding your goals, you can approach this in so many different ways. You can approach it in the flywheel way, or you can approach it in, if you do want to work on just, okay, we have a very tiny budget, we just need returns right now. The more retailers you're using, the more that you can spread those sponsored product ads around. And those are very low funnel purchase intent. So if you're saying, I just want to do my highest return, I want to defend my brand, get my brand ROAS and make sure that we're selling on these things. If you're on multiple retailers, you can do that in multiple places. You don't even have to go to the high level. Once you hit that point of saturation, of course, on any of these, then you can move up the funnel and go for, awareness, fill the funnel with your OTT or your DSP or whatever else to make sure that you're not hitting that market saturation, that point of diminishing returns when you're looking at sponsored product ads. So what I want to look at here is walk through just an example of, all right, let's go through a hypothetical here of, all right, what if your goal right now is to maximize long-term returns and customer loyalty? What do you need to know? What do you need to consider? what are you looking at? So for this example, you have a D2C site, you have Amazon, you have Home Depot and Walmart, and you want to maximize your long-term returns to maximum LTV and customer loyalty. What do you need to consider to make this decision if you're running, external ads, Facebook ads and Instagram ads to one of these channels? I think the first thing is, you need to know what is the lifetime value of these different channels, if that's what you want to maximize, and how do you understand that? You've got to learn the return on customer per channel. So if you're running those Facebook ads, what does that look like? What does the acquisition cost look like across channels? You're going to have different LTVs, but you're also going to have very different acquisition costs. One is, can the channel itself be improved? This is an interesting one. A lot of our clients are, when they come to us, say, we tried that channel, it just doesn't work for us. Sometimes that's true. A lot of the time, it's not the channel's fault. Especially when you're using long tail retailers like we talked about earlier. Home Depot seems really simple. It can actually be really hard to make it work. And then what are the other benefits? What is that market effect of each of those channels? So let's walk through this really quickly. Looking at these, how do you want to test these? So the first thing is there added long-term value from D2C or social shops with personal data? How are you going to go ahead and analyze this piece? How do you analyze the cost of acquisition? How do you make sure that your channel is managed with expertise? And how do you compare that to something else and find these benchmarks? And then what are the other benefits? So these are the tests that we want to run high level. So the first one is there added long-term value from D2C or social shops? And this is where you have to start compiling and combining all of your channels. This is what I was talking about earlier, where if your teams are divided, you're going to run into so many different problems. And in most of the traditional manufacturing brands, that's usually how we enter, is we look at their teams and go, this is the first problem you have to solve, is that you're siloed. And so the challenge here is that if you want to run your Facebook ads to your site or these other things, how do you know what the difference is? So if we want to analyze the LTV of our D2C or our social shops, do you have the efficiency of your return customers? Do you have the value of when you send an email list or add a customer to the email list? What's the value of your retargeting to your existing customers and loyalty build? And how do you compare your audiences and conversion rate of those social ads to a social store versus a D2C site, right? There's tons of testing and tons of data that you're going to need to put together to really make that ideal decision. And this is where it gets really important and a little bit more difficult, and where you have to start running lots of different tests and examining things. And if you're reading this and hearing, okay, email lists and retargeting, and you're not doing those, I would recommend getting those going immediately. They're super valuable. Email lists are one of the most valuable low-cost channels you can possibly have. And retargeting is great because the customer is already qualified, right? You know who you're retargeting to. They're always going to be some of the highest qualified pieces. So if you have all this, you need to combine that and compare it across channels. And then you can compare, okay, what's my LTV on Amazon? You have like my new customers, your returning customer data, and then the same for something like Home Depot and Walmart. And part of that starts running into, in-person challenges of, okay, how do we figure out what the returning and the loyalty is of a customer that's going to be in store with these things? So the next question is, how do we know that our channel is running well? And this is a really interesting one because it's somewhat qualitative. It's very hard to define this quantitatively. But this is an example. We had a client come to us and say, we have a pretty big budget on Home Depot. We're pushing this thing forward and we're getting absolutely nothing in return. They were running this in-house. They kind of figured, okay, we have some digital marketers here. Home Depot is a simple channel. We'll be fine. And about halfway through September, they signed up with us and we said, oh man, okay, we can fix this whole thing for you. And within 2.5 months, and I like showing this, but I also just, it's one of those case studies where the results are so insane, it hardly even seems real, but I can guarantee you this is real. This is real from only a few months ago. The results from August to November, the revenue increased 110 times with the budget only increasing 25%. So like what a return, right? And it was already a sizable budget to start with. And so that's the importance of going, okay, is the challenge here, right? In August, they might have concluded, man, we tried Home Depot advertising. It just doesn't work for us. And I hear that all the time. But it's worth making sure that when you're looking at this, that you have some kind of benchmark. So you can say, okay, it may not be working for us, but should it be? Is it working for other people? What does your expertise look like? Do you truly have somebody that specializes and has experience and has a proven track record doing this in-house or agency? So you can go, okay, we know what we're doing and we're doing it really well. And so it's really important when you're saying, okay, where do we want to spend our brand money? That you're not just grabbing the quantitative data and saying, okay, well, we don't want to send Facebook to Home Depot because there's no way Home Depot ever works. You need to also take that deeper level and say, okay, let's make sure that all these channels are being run well, and then we can figure out where the traffic should go and where we want to invest and where we want to build if there are those, market effects that we've talked about on something like Home Depot.
One thing I want to add to that too, which I think is really interesting, is that a lot, because we hear the same thing from brands who try to launch on a new channel or a new retailer and it doesn't work and they just want to give up and turn everything off. And what we've learned is you definitely cannot just copy and paste your strategy from one channel to the other. And I'm sure you would agree with that. But certainly that, even in simple examples like Amazon to Walmart, from how you structure your listings to the ads that you want to run and the keywords that you want to target, everything does need to be thought about differently with that particular retail media network in mind. So to your point about, getting that expertise, whether it's in-house or through an agency, I think that's probably the most important thing to achieving success as you start to branch out into these other retail media networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I talk about often as well. We've definitely gone into, sales pitches against other agencies, and they'll say, okay, well, how are you going to approach, our long tail retailers? And we get that all the time where it's like, oh, everyone copies Amazon, so we'll just spread the Amazon strategy. And it's like, that's not going to work at all for multiple reasons. Like, the APIs and the tools on something like Home Depot, or the targeting on a lot of these long tail retailers, it's wildly different. Amazon is entirely keyword based. Home Depot is very much categorically based. And so it's much more about how you position your products and where you're putting them. And so, yeah, to that point, it's really making sure you have that specific expertise and not just kind of the general expertise, because each one of these networks, for better or for worse, is fairly unique in the way that they're set up or what they're using.
100%. And then, I'm sure there's a ton of different differences in terms of how they attribute sales and the measurement and the quality of measurement as well. So even past, post-campaign launch, how you interpret success is very different across these networks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then so the next piece, right, in trying to make this decision, how do we test our cost of user acquisition? And there's a ton of tools to do this. So obviously, we're using Shopify to represent your D2C site. They're pretty popular D2C platform. It's very easy to track your Facebook or Instagram or ads to Shopify. It's a little harder to track them to something like Amazon, but it's doable. Amazon has Amazon attribution, which allows you to tag your external campaigns and see the results. So if you really want to understand where we're getting the best cost of acquisition and what how that compares to your lifetime value, we need to run that test. But it doesn't just stop there. Many other platforms have various ways of doing this testing. Home Depot, for instance, is one that has this thing called Vantage Plus. So you can't run external Facebook ads and just tag them, but you can run Facebook and Instagram ads through their Vantage Plus platform, which is kind of a workaround to testing, okay, will this work? It's directly integrated with Home Depot. And this works in a lot of different ways. Pinterest, for one, is one that's integrated with Shopify and Amazon and Home Depot and a bunch of retailers. So you have to sometimes get creative with how you're going to get that data. It's not always a straight up test or an easy campaign where you just say, all right, we're going to run this campaign to 3 different locations and get the direct data. But you can still run it at the same time to your Shopify, to your Amazon, to your Home Depot in different formats and say, okay, what's going to work the best for us? And even though the ads may be slightly different, like the one that's coming through the Home Depot API might be different, that's okay, because that's all you're going to be able to do. So the test still works in terms of, what is the ceiling of what we're going to be able to do with these. So again, what seems like kind of a maybe somewhat simple decision requires so much data and insight and testing and making sure that you have all of this data so you can really make the best choice. And then, finally, this is what we keep talking about that really is super important to measure. And we'll talk a little bit more about measuring this shortly, which is what are the other benefits of each of these channels? So we know our cost of acquisition, we're looking at LTV, but what are the pieces that aren't as obvious? And that is that relationship with, the physical retailers, the click and mortar, in-store placement, new product placement, relationships. And you need to figure out a way to quantify those things, because otherwise as a business, you might get hyper focused on one metric and miss the forest for the trees. So there's a lot of value in making sure that you're really analyzing and understanding all of these, even if some of your metrics will be more directional. So let's talk about, how to structure your teams so that you can actually do these. Part of the reason I like looking at this example is that a lot of the folks that we work with budget in weird buckets. Weird might not be the right word, but not successfully aligned buckets is probably a better way to say that. So when we're looking at this, a lot of the time we'll see, okay, we have shopper marketing over here, we have digital retail over here, we have search over here, social over here, video over here. There'll be a bunch of different teams. And then on top of that, sometimes it's a company that has multiple brands, and that's divided even further. So you have all these different things going on, and you run into this really big challenge of, okay, in that last example, we listed two different physical retailers, one digital retailer, your D2C site. Are those all the same team? If you were to run a test across all four of those at the same time from your social platform, how many people or how many teams would you need to involve and coordinate with and work with to make that test happen? And that's one of the big barriers that we see is that these budgets are very specific. And if your budget is super specific, the people managing it, in-house or agency, are going to have a harder time saying, okay, I'm going to use my budget for this other thing. Because if you're saying, all right, you have a $100,000 budget on Wayfair and I need a 4x return, your team is kind of hamstrung when it comes to doing things that aren't going to drive your maximum return. And so you're going to, again, miss the forest for the trees. You're not going to see that big picture. Those people are going to be hyper focused on like, my job depends on this. And even if their intention is good and they want to do the best thing for the company, they also know how they're being rated and kind of stuck in that box and really focus on what's going to help them go forward. So one of the big things is working on making these flexible budgets, making sure that your team is enabled and not aligned to silo, but aligned to work together. And this is just another example of this. This is what we see very often, where you have that search, that retail, you have your social, you have other collaborators, and the problem is they're all, it's four different agencies or it's four different in-house teams, but you get that silo. And when you have that silo, you really, really limit what you're allowing your team to easily do, and you limit the amount of insights and data and getting to that next level of saying, wow, we're really making the right decision versus, we're making the decision that applies with the lowest level of goals. That's when you get to that strategy and objectives. That's not helping your marketing or your business goals, but that's how you're aligned at the bottom of the people that are actually implementing these things and really, pushing forward, is that they get kind of stuck in those boxes. So breaking your team structure into, a one unified approach when you're talking about digital ads, because they all work together now. You can point things everywhere, you can account for things everywhere, and you have to be able to align those with that bigger picture of, even if you have a low ROAS on your click and mortar, you might actually have a huge return on investment. So moving beyond just return on ad spend to the full return on investment. The next piece here is the data, right? You need your single source of truth. And this is part of why we love partnering with Intentwise. They have Intentwise analytics. And so we use Intentwise analytics to grab all of our retail data, or at least all of it that we can through an API. Some don't have one yet, like Wayfair. So we import that manually. It takes a lot of work. But we use that to pipe all of our data into our database. And then we also have connections, of course, with Facebook and Instagram, Google and YouTube, and all of our other platforms. And when we have all of that into one singular database, it gives us a single source of truth to compare. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, not everything is going to be apples and apples. There's different attribution models, there's different things to look at. But by having all the data in one place, we can slice and dice this data to really drive a ton of insights and a ton of action here. And so this is one of the big initiatives, is after you've combined your teams, figured out how to make your budgets flexible, you then need to make your data in one spot so that you can really look at these correlations. And we'll talk about a couple of different things that we've done here. But there's so many different ways to combine your data and learn more. There's Amazon attribution where you can track leads. There's Walmart Connect where you can actually track correlative in-store purchases. AMC, you can upload first-party data and actually compare, okay, who's buying on my site versus who's buying on Amazon, or what's the relationship there, which is really important to understand. I know Intentwise ran a test where you had DSP to sponsored products. So when you have all these things, right, you have to ask the question at some point, are my ads cannibalizing each other? Or is this incremental value? Am I paying DSP ads to drive awareness, to click on my Facebook ad, to go to Amazon, to click on my sponsored product ad, right? Then your metrics get all messed up. Individually, they might all look great, but when you connect that funnel, you start discovering a lot of things. And so these are the pieces that are really important.
And you can discover a lot of waste through that process too, especially the more marketplaces you're selling on and the more ad types you have running across all of them. If there's say a scenario where the same shopper is being exposed to 12 DSP ads and 8 Walmart Connect ads and 3 Hulu streaming TV ads in the same day, every day for months and months, you could be wasting money. So it's important, again, to analyze that path to purchase at the customer level, regardless of the channel or ad or device type that they saw it on. And so it's very difficult to do even within a single channel if you don't have that data all consolidated and hosted in a database where you can make quick decisions on it. So especially as you start to multiply that by adding these additional retailers, I think it's so important And it's really all about trying to figure out what is my customer's path to purchase? Where do they want to engage with me? Where are they seeing my ads? And, is it the best experience that we can provide for them as the brand?
Exactly. And the big challenge here, and the one of my big takeaways is it's going to be different for every brand. We've seen, varying results, and that's why this database and this kind of insight are so important, because you just have to constantly be testing. You have to come up with those hypotheses, and you can hear, okay, another agency did this, case study that, but you always have to test your own hypothesis. It's not going to work exactly how it did for a different brand. And yeah, as there's more networks, there's more features on each network, the complexity becomes a permutation, right? There's more and more. So chipping away at these and answering, a question at a time will slowly but surely help you get to those business insights that you need to get to. What do you do with some of this data? A big piece of this is looking at something like, a retail media performance report. How do you combine these things and what can you do with them? So an example of one of our retail media reports that I really like is a cross retailer product dashboard. Now, that one in particular, I love a lot because what you're able to do is test things out on maybe one product and you can isolate the effects. If you have, let's say, one retailer, you're just on Amazon and your product spikes, there's a lot of noise. Did it spike because something caught on? Did the organic rank increase? Was it because I did this ad type? It's hard to tell. But if you're able to use, a majority of your products as a control group and say, we're gonna do a YouTube awareness campaign on this specific product. And this is actually something that we did for one of our clients. We did a YouTube bumper campaign for one specific product. We were able to correlate that to its growth across the retailers to say, okay, the other ones, our baseline products had a little bit of a market effect, but they stayed pretty stable. This particular product grew across all of these retailers online. So we were able to isolate some kind of ROI. We combined that as well with an online brand lift study. So we were able to say, okay, are we getting brand recognition and brand retention? And then to go even actually another layer deeper, we combined that with a Nielsen and Google offline study.
Wow.
And this was kind of fascinating. We ran the bumpers in a geographically fenced area, and we were able to connect with the retailers in that area so that we could see the sales increases. And we used, the other areas that were similar but not being advertised to as a control group. And we actually found out that the offline ROAS of these ads was 0.96. And that's significant, right? If you just isolated that, okay, maybe an under one ROAS isn't that exciting. But if you're adding that to your online ROAS, your retailer boost, your brand recall, and your brand recognition, and your offline sales, all of a sudden you go, wow, I can really understand the value of using YouTube bumpers for this. It's actually a huge, wonderful return. But you can only do that if you have all of that data, if you have these touch points and they're organized in a manner that you can actually pick and compare, that you can say, okay, we're going to isolate this product, we're going to advertise this product, and we're going to see how it varies from the other products across multiple touch points so that there's less noise, right? And even if you're not using this for this example, if you're not using this for a YouTube campaign, it's still just really nice to see if you're able to isolate that again and say, okay, wow, our product on this retailer is blowing up. How's it doing elsewhere? You can isolate effects that you may not be aware of, like something goes viral, or there's a big product on social, or there's a trend in the market. And maybe that trend is at one retailer, or maybe that trend is across retailers. And the more that you can understand that, the more that you're truly going to understand that customer journey and your retailers, and being able to separate the data from the noise, which is really important.
I love it. It's all about being more intentional on how you control all of those different things as opposed to just reacting to it when the metrics come back in.
Exactly. And in theory, sure, you can retroactively pull all these in a one-off report, but it's going to take a Herculean effort. It's going to be retroactive, right? If you have all this piping into a database already and you have these dashboards set up, then it's going to be live time. You're going to be able to see and recognize these things without saying, okay, I want to pull the reports for this specific thing. You can kind of see the anomalies, and then you go, all right, let's look into this. Let's really understand this and get that deeper understanding of how we're going to do this multi-retailer approach. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I know I've talked about it about 3 times, but all these different tools for testing as well. You want to make sure all these things are piped in as long, on the side of not only having that product database, those correlations, offline, online studies, but you have all these other tools to test things. And again, testing is going to be the way to really understand your customer, where they shop, how they shop, and what the true value of running ads across all of these are. When you have all that data in one place too, there's different types of dashboards. These are more tactical dashboards. This is going to be, more exciting for the person operating your account, but you can get these great economies of scale. You can look at your different retailers, you're using them all to harvest things like keywords. And again, this isn't going to apply to everybody. A keyword on one site may not work as a category in another, but it's really nice to be able to see, wow, these are performing really well over here. let's add them to our other retailers that use keywords. Or, what we see actually a lot, I have two different clients that their brand name is both their product and a tool company that just has the exact same name. So, being able to see, okay, what brand name plus, random tool or random material, we have to really be on top of those negatives, because you get a lot of branded clicks through a totally wrong product. And being able to see those and be able to spread that as quickly as possible across your different retailers is super important. So being able to see your ad types, are you using exact, using broad, where is it? And being able to use those, it doesn't guarantee that they'll be successful across the way, but it gives you a very quick leg up of building more data and leveraging the data across all of your channels as quickly as possible. And this even applies like, Google Shopping. You can take your Google Shopping data and use it in here as well. So you have all these sources that are harvesting keywords, finding the most efficient things, and adjusting them across. And similarly, you get kind of a market effect where, maybe one keyword gets really popular or explodes, and you can then say, where is exploding, why is exploding, and how do we go back and kind of reverse engineer what's going on to understand our market. So we're running up a little bit on time, so I'm going to get to the final piece here, the key takeaways. What have I been talking about this whole time? So number one, when you're on multiple retailers with all these channels, goals are more complex than you might think, and they really require deep testing to accomplish, both to succeed in the goal and to make sure that you have the right goal. If you're setting the goal with the data you have, it may be the wrong data. You may want to focus on one thing when another thing might be valuable. So set your goals and then test your hypotheses. Make sure that you're understanding the true value of each of those goals. To achieve this, your teams need to be unified, not the traditional siloed section, and they need to be working towards the same goals. When you have separate goals with agencies or internal teams, it's going to make it really hard for them to do that testing. And the same is true of budgets. Being able to have some kind of budget that can work and be more flexible to achieve your goal at any cost, whether that's efficiency, whether that's long-term value, whether that's placement in a certain retailer, you need to have that flexibility to make sure that you're getting the maximum returns or revenue or effect that you're looking at. Data consolidation and analysis is super important. The more you have, the more you can learn. But the big key here is setting it up in a manner that you can actually digest and see quickly. And that's always running there. So finding API partners and building your own dashboards, your own databases is huge, like Intentwise. And then finally, make sure that you're investing in the most aligned places for your business. That's the end goal. That's the point of all of these takeaways, is that at the end of the day, there's tons of retailers, there's tons of market effects, there's tons of ways to figure it out. But as long as you're continuing to push for that, you're going to find new ways to create value that go far beyond just return on ad spend or ACoS of looking at the advertisements on these retailers.
Love it. Spencer, this has been amazing. I think it's clear that you have got a ton of experience. You really put a lot of time putting together this presentation. And I think what's really important to all of our viewers today is that we understand the goals across retailers, we understand the challenges across retailers, and still are taking actions to make progress if there's an opportunity to expand to new retailers. So as before we wrap up here, Spencer, I wanted to just take a minute. We have one question in the chat, and then I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe explain a little bit more about what Search Nurture does, especially in the context of these retail media networks and how you help your partners. We have a question about the dashboards you were showing in, I think, an earlier slide. Are these all reports available in Intentwise, or are these proprietary to Search Nurture? I'm gonna let you take the lead. I think the answer is a little bit of both. Like, we help power some of the dashboards, but what you guys have created is definitely unique to Search Nurture, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Intentwise is our data partner. So that's where we're getting the API connections, getting that clean data from, and being able to pipe that in. But Intentwise doesn't connect with all of those, right? They don't connect with Google or Facebook. They're a retail-focused platform. So we use them to drive that data in, and then the dashboards that we've built are all proprietary. We build those in-house. But if anyone has any questions or wants to talk to me about building dashboards or building data, I'm super happy to be available. So feel free to reach out, and I'd love to dive in more and help other people kind of get to that next level of value.
Love it. Yes, and we love seeing what partners like you guys come up with, from the data pipes that we provide. So Intentwise is the pipeline provider. If you need the connections, you actually have difficulty getting the reports from the APIs, and you need it set up in a database for you, that's what we can certainly help with. We offer visualizations for those platforms as well. But if you are looking for something like Spencer just showed us, definitely reach out to Search Nurture. And by the way, I dropped Spencer's LinkedIn in the chat, so you can connect with him and message him there.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another question or comment here from Peter. if I wanted to get started doing all of this, I'm assuming in terms of testing more marketplaces, what would be the best way to approach getting started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a few ways to get started. If you have a big budget and an in-house team, the way to get started is going to be painful, but figuring out how to consolidate that team, choose some tests to get started on, find a partner that can help you get the data like Intentwise, or, partner with an agency and, having somebody that already has the experience and the dashboards and all of that built up can save you a lot of time, anguish, and resources in getting those tests going quickly and already knowing what to do. So I think one of those paths is probably the way to get started.
Yeah, it sounds like consolidating budgets, teams, everything. So it's, one focus, which is to grow the brand, and then leaning on external partners and agencies as necessary for their experience is the right way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So while we wait for any other questions that come up, Spencer, do you want to give us an overview of Search Nurture, how you help your partners, and to what extent you get involved in all of these cross-channel activities?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And so, yeah, what we just presented here and what we just talked about, that is kind of our core offering is we're a holistic e-commerce agency. And so coming up with these new innovative ways to test and to provide more value, that's exactly what we do. And we often like to say, don't partner with an ad manager. You want an advertising partner, right? There's a lot of people out there that can go in and manage your ads, and that's okay. We're going to just pull these levers. We're going to focus on ROAS. We're going to hit your, revenue or ROAS target, but that's only going to take your business so far. We really like to be that holistic partner where we say, okay, we want all of your data sources, all of your pieces. We'll build all of these APIs for you. We're going to put them in these dashboards. So you're not just getting advertising management from us, you're getting business insights and actionable insights that can make significant changes in how you're building that revenue, getting that return. And so that's what our partner is a very customized, hands-on, white glove service that's focused on finding new ways to get more enhanced returns on your advertising.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for spending the last roughly 55 minutes with us. I think we all learned a lot. Spencer, really appreciate your time today and putting this together. If anybody has follow-ups for Spencer, you know how to find him, LinkedIn, or go to searchnurture.com. And Spencer, I will have to maybe find an excuse to come up to San Fran a little bit earlier than the Walmart conference and we can hang out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come say hi. That'd be great.
Great. Well, thanks for your partnership. Thanks for today's session. And thank you to our audience. By the way, I didn't mention this at the beginning, but there's a quick survey that you'll be asked to complete when you exit the webinar today. Please just take 2 minutes and give us your feedback. It really does help improve the content that we prepare for you. And if you have any other feedback or recommendations for us, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you to everybody who joined today, and we're going to go ahead and cancel or wrap this up.
Thanks, everybody.